The following is intended for informational purposes only. It is intended to supplement classroom training and documentation. It should not be relied on as a replacement or substitute for classroom training with a live expert instructor. This workshop uses process flow to create a custom registration form. This example registration form is for training purposes only. In no way does it replace the existing base registration form. Welcome to this Config Tools PSRM 240 course. Let us start with an introduction and explain what the purpose of this course is about. It is a freely accessible, self-paced guide to config tools and Oracle Utilities application framework scripting from a hands-on perspective. Freely accessible because we've made it available on YouTube. You do not even need to have even an environment in order to use it. Self-paced, you can start and stop wherever you want, go back and look things up whenever you wish to. We're going to be concentrating on config tools with a specific goal of learning the scripting language within framework. And it's a hands-on perspective, meaning firstly, not everything will be explained. A lot of the things will be learned while looking at the application directly, and I hope that you might have an environment yourself that you can play with and to work with the exercises and the lessons as we go along. We will be using a registration form example built upon one of the base entities within the application called process flow. The purpose of using this particular example is that you do not need to require too much business knowledge within the public sector, tax. The user interface that we will create will be created entirely using UI hints, which is a method which makes it much easier to create the interface instead of using something called UI maps. This example is actually part of the demo data, so you will find it if you have a demo data environment, you'll be able to look this up. Important point to stress is that we do have a base registration form within the actual application, and that is the one you should be using. And this example is just there as an example to highlight features for config tools, but not to actually replace the existing base registration form, which is much more complete, much more sturdy, and is by far the supported Oracle entity that you should be using for registration form. And now let us start by showing you a demonstration of the actual the example that we will create. Once we have completed all the lessons, we will have created a fully functioning registration form, and I'm going to now turn to the application and show that to you. Okay, so I'm opening up the application now. I am using the demo data, and the first thing I'm going to do is go to the admin menu and go to registration form. A registration form here is again a demo, is our own config tools addition to demo data. It's not in the base product. So you will see that I have created here in the registration form list two registration form types, a business one and an individual. If I click on the broadcast below, you will see that we have a registration form type with a name. A person type describes the type of person that this registration will create, this registration form will create, in this case a business one. You can create a person together with an address, and the type of address is defined here, as well as a name that a person is created with. You can also you need to fill in an ID value, and here we define the ID type that this person will need to have. Again, person here is defining the person entity, and not and so a business is included under the term business entity. So if there's any confusion there, it should be clear that when I say this registration form will create a person entity, that will be an individual person or a business are both included within the concept of a person entity. And we will see the person entity as we go through now. We have a description, the status, and the transaction BO that will be used to create this particular registration form. As well as that, we have approval to-dos. To-dos are used in order to send out to a user an action to go into the registration form and activate the registration form when it's ready after it has been validated, and these to-do types and roles are the ones used. On the right hand side we have the standard actions that you have for an admin object. So that's the business one, and the individual one is similar except for different values. So it's using the same, we're using one BO for both, called registration form type. And the point I'm showing you here is this whole interface that I'm showing you now is what we will be building. We'll be building the menus eventually. We will be building the list over here, the whole interface over here to show you the registration form type, these buttons over here. Everything that you see here is what will be included within this course. So this is the admin side. I can create a new one. I'm not going to create one now, but obviously we have the ability to add a new one if we want to. So let's now create the registration form. So you will see that I've added a new menu, config tools, and let me create first of all a new registration form, and as you see it brings up the traditional choice for the type of registration form type, and I'm going to choose an individual registration form type. And you see here we have different sections: address, ID, related person, and name. The address type comes from the registration form type, and I can choose no country, and if I choose the particular country like United States, then the list of states is populated. So let me just pick out a random address, made a fictitious address. If, let's say, I leave the ID type blank for a moment, this ID type and format is coming from, again, from the registration form type. Let's say, well, let me put in just something in the wrong format. I can define a person, a related person, if I wanted to. Let's say I put in, I don't know, Bob Smith. Let's say Bob Smith is going to be married to Susan Smith, let's say, and I can put in spouse. We can have a middle name, let's say, let's put Jane or something. Okay, so we've set that up. If I try to save that, you see I have validation that this ID number is in the wrong format. So there are all different types of validation going on. So you see now the data for the registration form filled in. This is the user that's created the registration form. It's in a pending state. We have an address which hasn't been created yet. And now when we hit validate, we're going to check to see whether this address exists. If it does, we just return it and check to see whether Susan Smith exists in the system or not. So we're going to now do that by validating, and checks to see whether, again, the combination of Susan together actually comes up saying that Susan Smith might exist in the system, or the ID name, or the value. So let's go in to edit this. I'm not sure whether it's the name or the I'm going to pick a random first name. Hopefully that will be sufficient. I'm not sure if it's the ID, so let me be more random. This probably was the name. Let's see if that works now, if I can validate that. And I can validate and move to the next state. The next state is now called ready to post. This address is now being created for us. And the person hasn't been created. It's in a ready to post, and we would expect action here to say to now activate, but it's not there. And the reason is because in the final version of the registration form, we've put in access rights that this particular user group who user 00 is part of doesn't have access to the last state. So in fact what we're going to do is log out and come in now with a different user. Okay, we're going to log out. I'm going to come in with my own individual user, and I know that I have rights to activate this registration form. What I'm going to do now is look at the to-dos that have just been created, and there is a to-do type, which I know there is one called registration. This one over here, and if I actually look to see, you'll see that there are I just created right now, this to-do was created by the fact that we validated, and you can go directly from here to the registration form. Okay, and now because I'm now my own user, I have the action activate, and now I can click on activate, and this is a way of monitoring this registration form. The final product of this registration form version has the ability to move directly to the final state of active if, let's say, a certain amount of time has elapsed, like 30 days, it will automatically move to the final state, or we can activate it by clicking on activate, or we can also activate it by just completing the to-do. Anyway, there are a few different options, but here I'm going to just click on activate, and when I click on activate, hopefully the person now is going to be created, Tamar Smith, and let's have a look to see what happens. In fact, you see now I have put Tamar Smith over here, and if I click on that, you will see that this person entity has now been created, and this is my the name, Tamar Smith. The middle name I see has not been added in, and perhaps that wasn't added in the final version. The security number, the ID value here, the address, and the related person. So all this was done with this custom registration form which I created, and this is the lesson which we will, at the final lesson, this is what we'll be producing. We will produce a registration form type that we saw before, and a registration form that I've now demonstrated now, with the logs, everything complete, and hopefully this lessons will show you how to do it. If you remember, I had a to-do, it's now in the complete state because I clicked on the final button. All this work is going to be shown to you how to create this registration form with its type. Now let me go through the different lessons that we have and give a very brief overview of what we will be achieving in each particular lesson. This is the introduction, lesson 1, and its purpose is to describe to you why we are doing this course, who is it for, and give you a demonstration of the complete registration form demo that will be the final product after you've completed these lessons. In the next lesson, in lesson 2, we will be introducing the BO schema designer. This is used to define a BO schema, and we will also see how, using UI hints, we can automatically create the user interface. In the past, the only way to create a sophisticated user interface would be by using UI maps. Now we can create something directly using the BO schema designer when we enable UI hints. And the final product at the end of this lesson 2 will be a basic registration form type. Then we will move on to a more advanced schema designer techniques in lesson 3, and we will see a more advanced usage of UI hints and the schema designer and what it can produce. And you will see that the registration form type that we will have created at the end of lesson 3 will have drop downs, some defaulting and dependencies, all created without needing to deal with UI directly. In lesson 4, we will turn our attention to the registration form itself, and we will be looking at the life cycle of a BO. A transaction based BO like registration form has a life cycle, and we will see how the life cycle was built, and also how certain things like action buttons from the life cycle can directly be added to the user interface very easily. After we have completed the basic registration form type and registration form, we will go on to introduce the scripting language, and we will describe the basic syntax, give you a good example of how to get started by creating a person entity, how the registration form will, at the end of the posting of the registration form, it will create a person within this system, and we will show you how you can get help to get more information about the syntax of scripting. We will introduce a good IDE developer interface that you can use to build these scripts, and also we will introduce XPath, which is another XML language that is used and is part of the Oracle scripting language itself. And we'll see how XPath works, and we'll see how Oracle scripting works together. In lesson 6, we will look at BO inheritance. We will be looking at parent and child business objects, and how the purpose of creating this is to organize and reuse BOs in an efficient way, use all the object-oriented design patterns of inheritance, and we will be creating a business and an individual registration form using this parent-child concept. We will then, in lesson 7, be looking at how we can enrich the business object with more data. Data which isn't necessarily directly found on a business object can be added by using an embedded HTML, using UI fragments, and we will be enhancing at the registration form with the ID type and value, some information placed on the registration form type, and some of it directly on the registration form. In lesson 8, we will look at different types of BO validation. We will look at the concept of creating certain elements within a business object as required elements, creating validation algorithms within the BO, and adding state to another state which can deal with validation issues within the BO lifecycle. Specifically regarding our example registration form, we will be validating and formatting the ID type and value correctly, and then we will be adding a validating state that checks to see whether a person already exists in the system before creating a new person entity. In lesson 9, we will be adding further BO functionality. We will be taking many of the lessons that we have learned from lessons 2 to 8 and taking an example of adding an address and address type to the registration form, which will then create a person with an address, as our example of how we can use much that we have learned up till now and add in more complicated, more complex BO functionality. So lesson 9 is a little bit of a review and putting together many of the concepts that we've learned until now. In lesson 10, we will describe the use of data areas. Data areas can be used to rearrange and create a business object in a way that you can have better reuse of your BOs. You can rearrange the user interface easier by using data areas. And you can also extend even a base BO using an extended data area, and we will describe that in this chapter. And we will see that within the context of our registration form, how easily it is to rearrange sections once you create everything within data areas. In lesson 11, we will be looking at BO lists, the ability to add a recurring list within a business object, and how we work with that, both within the schema of the BO and how the schema editor helps you create those lists, and also within scripting, within code, how do you work with lists. And in our example here, we will be working with the related person list, adding a related person into a registration form, which will then eventually populate the person entity. In lesson 12, we will be looking at how we control a business object, how we add in access control so that not everyone can necessarily access or activate certain functionality within a particular state of a business object. And in our particular case, we will be restricting particular user groups so that they can't post the form. On the way, we will show how within code we create to-dos to alert, let's say in our example, a supervisor that they have a form that needs to be posted, creating a log as well of the to-do, and then dealing with monitor algorithms, which deal with the ability to stop and start the process of a business object lifecycle at particular points within the lifecycle. And in our particular case, we'll be looking at how do we post a form after the to-do is complete, or if there's a time limit has gone up, a certain amount of time has passed, how do we automatically move to a next state? And that's our way of showing and describing, looking at monitor algorithms. From lessons 13 onwards, we are now dealing with more global issues about how do we add in menus and deal with navigation on a higher level, and not looking at a particular now example of adding functionality to our registration form. So we're going to deal much more generally about BPA scripts, which are the client-side scripting that you need to use in order to create and work with menus. We will see how they work together with nav options and portals and zones. And we will be customizing our registration form type in a way that we can create a dedicated menu for registration form type within the admin menu, and it doesn't have to live directly within process flow type. So we'll be looking at that as an example to describe and look at how do we work with menus and navigation. In lesson 14, we will be doing a very similar type of exercise that we did in lesson 13, but here we will be taking in a transaction menus, the main menus, and doing the same thing to create dedicated menus for the registration form. And in this example, in this particular case, it's a little bit more complicated, and we will see how all the scripts, these front-end client-side scripts that we use, the BPA scripts, work one with another, and how do we change them and update them so that we can actually create these dedicated menus. In the last chapter, we will be looking at specifically about query zones and query portals and how we customize those. We will see how we deal with showing CLOB data directly within the output of a query zone. So we don't actually have to show real fields in the output of a zone, but also CLOB data, and how we could even possibly query by CLOB data. And we were again looking at the registration form query portal and zones, and how we could actually query by the registration form name, which is being placed in CLOB, and how we can show that in the output and query by the registration form name as well. We'll be in these lessons that I've described over here, I've described high level what we'll be achieving. Along the way, we'll be touching other pieces and other functionality as we go along. So, how to use this course? Well, I would suggest that you work in order of the lessons. Each lesson builds upon the other, as you've already seen as I went through the overview of the different lessons. So I suggest you run through one by one. Each lesson is its own YouTube video, and in total it's around 7 to 8 hours of video, and you can do it in all one day, or you can do it over a longer period of time. It'd be great if you actually had an environment at your disposal so you could work through and attempt some of the things that I'm doing before you see how I do it. You compare and see how the best way to approach each lesson problem. Who is this particular course for? I would say there's two audiences. It's an introduction for people who are implementers, who are technical, and would like to actually get a quick understanding of config tools. Could be someone also, though, who has had more experience and wants to have a refresher knowledge. So there's two different audiences, and you could actually look up in the YouTubes. There will be a index of subjects where you could actually point you to particular parts of the videos, so you can skip and jump into something if you want to look at a particular way I'm doing a particular functionality or technique. What is the expected knowledge of someone taking this course? Well, someone with technical background definitely has had experience with some sort of language, a scripting language, knows basic SQL, important, and database concepts. It is useful, not paramount, but definitely would be very useful if you did have some PSRM knowledge and you can navigate around the application. I'm definitely not going to be explaining everything, so therefore if you have some knowledge prior, it would be very useful. I've added in also a warning. I'm not covering everything within this config tools course. For example, UI maps, which is a traditional way of creating the user interface, I'm not following. I'm not covering, and I don't, as I just mentioned, I don't explain everything in depth, because I think that by showing an example and jumping into the application, sometimes you can get a quicker understanding than if I go into more detail. And there are traditional training available, like the Config Tools Foundation course and its GUI course, which you can look at or you can take if you want the more traditional approach. Finally, I'm not covering Java. The way to create plugins, which back-end functionality of expanding the product, can be done in two different ways. You can use scripting or you can use Java, and Java is often a preferred choice if you have a particular hard and very used particular plugin which is hit again and again and again, and you want to actually better performance. Java might be the better way to go. But I'm only showing here the scripting, which is within config tools. The front-end programming, which is the BPA scripts, the navigation around the application, that you have to do through scripting. So therefore, scripting is important regardless of whether you're a Java program or not. If you want to create your plugins in Java, that's fine, but you still need to understand how BPA scripts work and other service scripts and so on. Finally, it's left for me to just introduce myself. My name is David Eisenthal. I'm an architect for PSRM, and I will be your host throughout these 14 lessons. I'm also the author of this course. All comments and feedback welcome to my email address. It's above. You should see it. davidxeisenthal@oracle.com. Please send me whatever comments and feedback that you have. I'll be most welcome to receive whatever you find within this course that can be improved. And I hope that you enjoy. Thank you.